language experience approach, LEA for short, is an invaluable approach for LL-SIFE to support their acquisition of language, reading and writing in English in a natural way. The central principle of LEA is to use the student's own vocabulary, language patterns, and background experiences to develop text that is relevant and meaningful. For this reason, a version of LEA, adapted to meet the needs of Ls who are emergent readers, is featured throughout the Bridges curricula. Language experience approach always begins with a shared experience related to the class content. This might be a field trip, a collaborative activity, a play, a game, presentation, or a scientific experiment. In Bridges, we also consider collective viewing of video clips or listening to text being read aloud as a shared experience. For the purpose of this video, we visit Bridges Science Unit 2.
¿Qué tú crees que va a pasar mañana?
Yo creo que mañana se va a poner azul el pétalo.
So this week we're learning about the structures of plants and the functions of those structures. And the experiment of this week focuses on the stem and its function to transport water through the plant. That experiment becomes the main input for the subsequent LEA activity. What is this? If you take one piece off the flower, what do we call this? That's Spanish. Do you remember the English word? Petal. Petal. Soil. And what is this one? Ground. This is easy, I think, for you. Transport. Transport, what does that mean?
Reading involves matching oral language with print. This is a central part of the reading process. If students do not have the words, the oral language, reading simply becomes word calling, deciphering words without comprehension. Eliciting common language first happens through an informal conversation, where students discuss what they experienced.
So who can tell me, what did you do yesterday?
We can put, you can separate in food that we can change.
What did you put the water in?
In the color.
Wait, you put the water in the?
In the water.
Nice word. Container.
The goal here is to communicate about the experience. Accuracy in English is not the priority. The goal is to express ideas and understandings in ways that make sense to the students themselves.
In container water.
The core component of LEA is the moment where the teacher transcribes what students are saying.
What did we do yesterday?
We put a container of water.
We put a container.
As students speak, the teacher turns their oral output into print. Students witness that anything that they can say may also be written. When students are pushed to describe the experience, they fish for language they need. There's a need to use language. It is not simply a language exercise. This foundation prepares students to read a more academic text excerpt in the next week.
So tell me why? Why did the petals change?
Because the flower, he absorbed the water.
Good. The flower absorbed the water. Did the flower absorb the water? The petals absorb the water, yes, but before, you see the water is here, down here.
The stem absorbed the water.
The stem absorbed the water. The stem absorbed the water and then it transported the water
Into petals.
to the petals. And the only thing that is missing is the title.
How the stem transport the water.
The LEA text is not a substitute for, but rather a scaffold towards reading academic text related to content students are studying. After transcribing what the students say, it is important for the teacher to read the whole text aloud, including any errors that were transcribed.
Petals changed to the color blue.
This is because students then hear their own language spoken out loud with fluency and accurate pronunciation. Often, students catch the errors once they hear it aloud, When they do not spot the errors on their own, this is information for the teacher about student understanding. It is then in the teacher's hands to target this understanding through more explicit instruction when it is developmentally appropriate.
We ate 250 milliliters? No. What word do we need? Tell me in Spanish, tell me in Wolof or Arabic. What's the word we need? Put! Yes, we put!
For example, if a word is missing from the syntax of the sentence, the teacher might draw a line to signal to students that a word is missing, or the teacher might circle or underline the part of the sentence that is problematic and challenge students to solve the problem collectively.
Now, it should be noted that often not all mistakes can be corrected. They shouldn't be. There certainly is not time enough to deeply teach and practice the rationale behind all corrections. What's important to understand about this step is that unlike the previous steps which focused on meaning, here the focus is on accuracy of English language use.
After correcting the text to the extent possible, the whole class reads it chorally.
All right, let's read it together. Everybody.
How the sea transports the water.
Whole reading means that the whole class reads it together. This supports fluency and builds even more familiarity with the text, the words, and the sounds of the entire phrases and sentences. Students practice pronunciation without being singled out. This also supports students to track print as the teacher points to each word that is read. In this step, students experience something fundamental, that we can read what we can speak. This is the point of departure for learning to read and build students' identities as readers. This is what LEA is for, to give students access to text by having them read what they know. For Bridges students, it's also important to incorporate a separate instructional move around chunking text. During this step, the teacher chunks the text into portions that correspond to the ways fluent speakers of English speak and read.
250.
Good. 250. 250.
This builds fluency and prosody, but it also breaks down the sentence into smaller units of meaning. Students practice with each chunk through echo reading, meaning that the teacher reads it first, then students repeat. The next day, the teacher has prepared a typed-up version of the text.
So when students encounter the typed-up version of what they authored together on the previous day or in the previous lesson, they are familiar with the text. They recognize it right away, and they do not experience intimidation or cognitive overload. Again, the emphasis here is on the fact that students learning to read must read language that is familiar.
Students learn to recognize words in print that are familiar to them orally. In that way, comprehension, the very purpose of reading, is inherent in the process of reading. This is essential because it leads them to expect that reading makes sense. Another reason that we make use of LEA, particularly in the beginning of the year, is because often texts for emergent readers are inappropriate for secondary students, both culturally and because they are designed for young American children. They have little cultural relevance for newcomers from countries where knowledge of America is limited. In contrast, LEA fosters the foundational skills that are central to reading, using language and subject matter that is based on students' experience. There are a number of extension activities that can follow to support development of foundational reading skills. Some of these include focusing on sight words, close activities for vocabulary building, especially academic vocabulary, syntax activities such as sentence scrambles, punctuation activities, phonics exercises, sequencing activities, translanguaging activities. The extension activities target numerous aspects of language and literacy acquisition and also offer opportunities for formative assessment.
Students see their language become print as they engage with this familiar text through choral reading, chunking exercises, and the various extension activities. Students build fluency, they practice pronunciation, They fortify their conceptual understanding of content, of course, but they also develop metacognitive awareness about language features, what it means to correct oneself, what it means to craft a cohesive paragraph, and much more. I'm getting it, but can I do it one more time, okay?